was a gleam in my boss's eye when I worked there a long time ago. And it's where they show you all the technology and research that went into building that fantastic plane. You know, I've been on them twice. They're pretty cool, the 787. I mean, the documentary on Magellan, of course, is also cool, but it doesn't take you to another destination. You have to get on the plane for that. So get your exclusive 2-month free trial today at MagellanTV.com/Science Rules. Just as one might expect. It's MagellanTV.com/Science Rules.
Science Rules is back.
So what is the deal with iodine? It's since I was a kid. Iodine tablets for
potassium iodide,
for the nuclear attack.
So your thyroid takes up iodine, particularly children.
Where do I get my iodine?
Milk.
Milk
can be one place. And so basically, if you ingest radioactive, radioiodine from milk sources or something that's been contaminated, then what you want to do is take potassium iodide because it basically floods the system.
So your system takes up the pill you take iodide rather than the radioactive iodide.
Correct. So you just flood the system.
You flood your system, Corey.
But the only thing that potassium iodide pills do is really prevent the risk of thyroid cancers, which is one special case, and is really predominantly children that would be at risk.
Do we have... You just offhandedly say, we got drugs, Corey. You got drugs when your immune system is suppressed. So are these drugs sitting around in emergency rooms waiting for a nuclear? They are?
Yeah.
These are my tax dollars at work?
Yeah, they're our tax dollars at work. They're in warehouses. So the federal government has put in over $6 billion to develop what we call medical countermeasures for CBRN threat agents. So these are chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear agents.
Oh, so that's the acronym CBRN.
CBRN, yep. And so over the past 15 years...
So $6 billion over 15 years?
Yeah.
With respect, that's not that much money as money is spent.
It's not, and when you think about defense, how much money is spent in defense, et cetera, it's not. But it has led to the approvals of 3 new drugs for treatment of radiation sickness.
Well, why not give everybody in the U.S. a bottle of the drugs?
Couple reasons. Not everybody would need it. You don't want to just give everybody drugs that can, potentially have side effects. These have very low side effects, we know, because they're given to cancer patients to treat side effects of chemotherapy, for example. But they are in warehouses and they are in hospitals, and they would be used in the aftermath of a radiological or nuclear event.
This is also spectacularly hypothetical. It's just so crazy dangerous, it seems.
You said 3 drugs. What are the 3 drugs?
The 3 drugs.
What do they do?
So the 3 drugs are Neupogen, Neulasta, both from Amgen, and Leukine from Partner Therapeutics. And all 3 of those are now approved. These drugs basically stimulate recovery of the white blood cells that fight infection. And so you reduce that window or narrow that window that people are at risk for life-threatening infection.
Because that's what kills you.
This part, that's so in some cases.
How does radiation kill you, Corey? Doctor?
I think that would be a much better question for our expert.
There are several ways. The first is, this bone marrow suppression that can occur. And so you lose your ability to fight infection. And so people die from infection. The other is that radiation can affect your vasculature. And so it can cause, and also a blood cell type called platelets that help blood to clot.
Yeah, vasculature it affects your blood vessels.
Yeah, it affects your blood vessels, and it affects your ability to clot. And so people can essentially begin bleeding, and if they don't have platelets, they can die from essentially a trauma-induced hemorrhage.
You get cut with glass blown in your face by the explosion, and then you bleed to death because you can't clot.
That's right.
How long does it take for you to not be able to clot? Is it instantaneous?
No, it's about 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
2 to 3 weeks. Yes.
So if we had 2 to 3 weeks, we might treat those people some other way.
Exactly, like blood transfusions. Give people blood transfusions until those platelets come back.
Okay, so then there's a third way. It just messes with your DNA?
It does mess with your DNA. That we can't solve. There are a lot of drugs out there that try to help the DNA repair itself that are being tested. So there's over 100 drugs that are that are in early to kind of, intermediate stages of development for acute radiation sickness. It's a big program managed by the government. There's a lot of pharmaceutical companies that have drugs. Some of the drugs are already approved and used in the hospital to treat various illnesses. And we're trying to repurpose them.
This is cool. So I think it's time for some calls.
Yes, let's go to the phones.
Let's go back to the phones. We have Annika here. And Annika, my very first question back to you is, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, it's Annika.
Okay, great.
And where are you calling from, Annika?
I'm calling from the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada.
It's glorious and free.
Yes.
You have a question.
Yeah, so I actually used to, I had a co-op at Babcock & Wilcox, kind of the company that makes nuclear machinery for the plants. And I'm wondering, the radiation that comes from the power plants, does that actually reach the general public and, our environment, and will that have a long-term effect on us? And if it does, are there other green energy sources that could be used to reduce our fossil fuel impact?
That's a really good question. I mean, it's certainly, the nuclear power plants are very well contained. And so, it certainly should not be releasing any sort of radioactive materials into the environment.
They don't release.
No.
But what everybody's concerned, I think, is these 3 accidents that were troublesome. Yeah. And then nobody really has an intuitively good way to dispose of nuclear waste, even if it's a small amount.
That's true.
If you got to store something for hundreds or thousands of years, you're talking on timescales of the Roman Empire. I mean, it's pretty haughty to think your government's going to do as well as the Roman Empire.
But I do have a related power question following up here. What about radioactivity from coal plants? Are they significant radiation emitters?
That I don't know. That's really outside of my area of expertise. I mean, my expertise is really on, what are the biological effects if there was an accident.
Well, let me ask you this.
I don't really.
Are coal miners or miners of other types
right.
Unusually, or do they have a higher level of radiation exposure than the rest of us?
That's a good question. Probably.
I think black lung and those things probably predominate over anything else. I think that there are other very, very high risks that probably swamp out that effect.
And then the other one I always wonder about is people who mine uranium and thorium.
They do. So they study those populations.
And what do we learn?
I'd have to go to the literature to look at that.
But they do. Much, or they wouldn't be allowed to have the job. Especially, if I may, Annika, in Canada, with the tradition of socialized medicine and government involvement. And so with all that
I've also heard...
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I've also heard that they kind of recycle a lot of our water through the lakes as well, so I wasn't sure if the radiation is somehow getting into the lake.
I just don't think it is. In other words, that part of the nuclear industry is very well controlled, very well understood, and very well controlled. But what's happened historically is because nobody can agree on what to do with the nuclear waste, it's stored now at all these power plants. Yeah, and people talk about putting it in geologic structure, on big caves where nobody goes, and it would be underground and out of sight and not out of mind, but out of range. But the infrastructure for doing that is complicated, and how do you move it through somebody's hometown without terrorists showing up and causing trouble? And you could recycle the fuel and make it even more, and so on and so on. But if I understand it, Dr. Jackson, people are more afraid of radiation than they should be.
Yeah,
is that accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the nuclear power plants, they're not leaking, radiation into the environment. And even if the doses would be so low that it would not cause an increase, in cancer incidence amongst the population around it. So there's, in my opinion, no need to be concerned. I wouldn't be concerned.
She wouldn't be concerned. Thank you very much for your call, Annika. Enjoy the beautiful summer weather in Ontario.
Science Rules will be right back.
Getting promotional products shouldn't be rocket science. Whether it's pens, water bottles, or travel mugs, Quality Logo products can put your design on just about anything. Placing an order at Quality Logo products is fast, easy, and simple because their patented website search functions help you limit that selection by what's most important to you, whether it's your budget or the date you need your items delivered. Better yet, what you see is always what you pay. Simply enter your order quantity and instantly see a precise breakdown of every pricing detail right on the screen. No hidden fees and shipping is included. Plus, you'll have a dedicated 100% human customer service professional to keep you updated every step of the way. You know, at the Planetary Society, we get our rubber mini asteroid stress balls from Quality Logo products. They're not real asteroids, and they're not really balls, but they do relieve stress. That's one way to tell they're not real asteroids. So head to qualitylogo.com and use the code ScienceRules to save 10% on your order. That's qualitylogo.com and use the code ScienceRules to save 10%.
You're listening to Science Rules.
Now, in a separate but unrelated issue, I think has to do with the word radiation. So we have another caller about this. Is that a true fact or a false fact?
That is a half-true fact. You forgot to consider the third possibility. We got a question, and the caller could not make it onto the phones to talk to us. So I will be playing the role of Johnny. So in the role of Johnny, I have a question for you. So recently, I've seen a number of videos warning us of the dangers of radiation emitted by the new 5G communication towers. There are claims of peer-reviewed studies, etc. Do you and do Bill, do you have an opinion on this? Have you seen the science on it? If there is, I mean, is this also a dangerous kind of radiation?
So I will say that's far outside my area of expertise. My expertise is in ionizing radiation, and that is non-ionizing radiation. You know, scientific opinion, no, I don't think it probably has any effect.
So when you say non-ionizing radiation, you mean it doesn't have enough energy to knock those electrons loose and make your atoms kind of chemically active.
Correct.
So the 5G system works with the same phone you have now. So it's almost certainly not going to affect anything. So there's just, I'm a big skeptic, Doctor. By that I mean literally.
I am as well.
Right on, blow it up. Both in the
sound effects.
Sorry. Oh my goodness. Yes. That's what we do when we do a fist bump with a lot of drama. You're using the same phone. There are billions of phones, and very, very few people have any effect at all. The problem is when you drop your phone, you bend down, you hurt your back. That's very dangerous. And there's a famous incident in the skeptic community. I'm in both the skeptics and the Committee for Scientific Inquiry, CSI. And there's a famous incident where there's a real estate agent in Florida, and her husband had a picture of her on her cell phone, and she got brain cancer. But correlation does not mean causation, as we say. So just because you saw this one picture of this one woman who happened to get brain cancer, which is very troubling, it doesn't mean it absolutely does not mean the phone caused it. If cell phones were really as dangerous as some of these extraordinary claimers claim, I mean, so many people would be dead or have tumors or whatever the amount of energy emitted and received by mobile phones is tiny. And it is not, as you say, Doctor, ionizing radiation. These are not beta particles or alpha particles. It's radio wave.
But this is a great moment
to
walk through.
Very dim light bulb.
Yeah, to walk through the different things that people call radiation, because they do call, like your Wi-Fi runs on radiation.
That's
5G uses radiation. So what is the difference between these different types of radiation? Maybe you can kind of decode
The energy. So, when we talk, my area of expertise is with, alpha, beta particles, gamma rays, X-rays. High energy, it can essentially knock out an electron out of its orbit, leads to an unpaired electron, then those molecules. An ion. And now they want to find, that electron somewhere else. And so they pull it from the DNA, or they try to pull it from some other cellular, what we call macromolecule, and it causes damage.
You mess up the molecules in the cells, and then the cells get messed up, and you get sick, and in the worst case, you get really sick.
Exactly, and then those cells start sending out what we call danger signals. Hey, I've been attacked. And so now the neighboring cells, even if they weren't exposed to the radiation, they start putting up defenses, mounting defenses, because they're getting those fire alarms going off, hey, we've got a problem.
Whenever I think about radiation, now we have sieverts. That's a measure,
Sievert's
right?
grays.
We used to have rads.
That's right.
And sievert is a metric unit, right? And it used to be a Curie. Do we still use Curies?
We do, and Becquerels. It depends on what type of radiation you're talking about. If you're talking about, radioactive decay. I focus on grays. We use grays mostly, which is 1 joule of energy per kilogram of tissue, which is equivalent. There's
1,000 cc's in a liter.
Yeah.
So a kilogram of humans weigh about as much as water, right?
Yeah.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
So it's like that's a joule per kilo. Would be a millijoule per cc. Yeah. A thousandth of a joule.
Your math is better than mine.
Well, if it's that simple. Yeah. All right. So with that said, or that complicated, how do we know how much of a jolt sieverts, becquerels, rads? What's the other one?
There's a couple like REMS, Rankine equivalent men.
Okay. Anyway, how do we know
how much dose?
Yeah.
Depends. If we're talking about biological dose, it's really hard to estimate. So you can estimate it by determining what we call lymphocyte depletion kinetics.
What's the first word?
Lymphocyte.
The white blood cell kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
How fast do you lose them, or they die? Mm-hmm. So as they drop, your lymphocyte counts.
So did we do this, just to put you on the spot, were these done with primate models, as they're called?
This one's done with humans, but yeah, we do it in primate models. If we're doing primate models, you can if you're doing a controlled exposure, you can prescribe a specific dose. And in that case, we have radiation physicists who come in and they do the calculations, and then they would prescribe same way we do it in clinical radiation therapy. You can prescribe a specific radiation dose.
To a monkey.
To a monkey. You can do it to any, yeah.
To a monkey.
Yeah, to a monkey.
But we all depend on this sort of research, right?
Yes. Yeah, we do.
Now, speaking of non-primates, well, unless you mean my old boss. Anyway, what is that? Here, where is it? There. Yeah. Is it a myth? So people at high altitude, you would expect to get more radiation. There's less atmosphere blocking charged particles from our own life-giving sun. All right.
So they have more background radiation.
Yeah. Do pilots and flight attendants get more of a jolt than the rest of us?
They certainly do.
Is it noticeable?
They do. And I think that they actually do control for that, how many flights people can, how many pilots can fly based on exposure, natural background radiation exposure. So you do get higher doses of radiation exposure when you're flying.
And the famous one is the banana.
Yes.
What happens with a banana?
I'll let you tell me.
No, they have calcium.
Bananas are full of potassium.
Yeah.
And
potassium.
Yes.
I misspoke. Doggone it.
Right. So they've got some natural radioactive potassium in them, and because they're high concentration of potassium, bananas are one of the more radioactive foods. Yeah. So a truckload of bananas allegedly, and
Allegedly
has enough radiation to set off, some of these ultra sensitive radiation detectors. I would need to check that.
That could be true. I mean, they're very, very sensitive. That's why, even after Fukushima, any of these, these detectors would pick up a little bit higher, doses of radiation, but it's because they're so sensitive.
But so bananas are a very weak source of radiation, but they are a source of radiation.
Wow.
We have to Google that.
With that said.
What is happening, Bill?
Oh, I think that the clouds nearby are discharging their into the ground or from the ground to the cloud, superheating the atmosphere so quickly.
They're ionizing the gas and creating free radicals?
Which we smell as ozone, which is O3, but more importantly.
Oh, it's the lightning round.
Yes.
The lightning round.
The lightning round. So here, Dr. Lauren Jackson, we are going to ask you to answer these questions.
Now.
Okay.
No. This might be the best part.
Yeah. Quick questions, quick answers.
Cool.
Living at high altitude, big risk or not big risk? If I'm
Not
living
a
in
big
Denver.
risk.
What's your favorite form of radiation?
Oh, my favorite form? Gamma rays.
Why? Who doesn't love gamma rays?
Yes, but what do you love about gamma rays?
What I love about gamma rays, because that's what I work with.
Can you develop a pill for radiation sickness so that I can go into space and not have to worry about radiation?
A vaccine, like a type of radiation vaccine.
A vaccine?
Well, if you